and welcome to a brand new episode of The Daily Debate. My name is Ahmed Nader, and as we did say goodbye to the year 2020 and we are welcoming the year 2021, we will be focusing tonight on the achievements in the fields of infrastructure and the economy under the tenure of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi in the past 6 or 7 years, and more specifically in 2020, despite facing up against the coronavirus pandemic in Egypt and in the world, as we did see. And we will be looking ahead to what will be happening in the fields of the development of infrastructure, the economy, the reform programs that have been implemented here in Egypt, and the initiatives, the economic initiatives and the social initiatives that will be launched and were launched in 2020 and in 2021 to be facing up against the coronavirus pandemic and the economic repercussions of the COVID-19 in Egypt. And tonight I'm honored to be having with me in the studio Dr. Meha Mustafa, the Professor of Economics at the American University in Cairo and the economic expert. Thank you very much for being with us tonight, and a Happy New Year.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.
Pleasure is all mine. We will be starting with, as I said, the tenure of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi had highlights of development and progress in the fields of networks, roads, infrastructure and developing the economy. And we did see on the first day of 2021, on Friday morning, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi laying the marker once again and giving a message out to the Egyptians and to the world that we will be continuing work despite the coronavirus pandemic. And we will see in the upcoming report the inspection tour made by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi for the Middle Ring Road, so stay tuned.
President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi inspected on Friday construction projects in Cairo, including the 156-kilometer-long Middle Ring Road that links cities east and west of the capital. Consisting of 16 lanes, 8 in each direction, the Middle Ring Road is considered one of the widest in the Middle East. The road extends from the city of Bilbais in the Sharqiya Governorate in the east of Egypt to the Dab'a corridor in the west. The road has been constructed to serve tens of thousands of vehicles daily, help reduce traffic congestion and travel time, limit car crashes and save fuel cost. The Middle Ring Road is located in an area between Greater Cairo's Ring Road and the regional Ring Road, serving all governorates of Upper Egypt, Nile Delta and Canal cities. It also serves the new cities on both sides of the road in the east and west of Cairo, such as New Cairo and the 6th of October city. The President on Friday's tour also included Al-Matariya district and the new Mohammed Al-Assar axis, linking East Cairo with the Shubra Benha axis and the Road Al-Farag Dab'a axis. Mohammed Al-Assar axis saves travel time from Cairo toward the northwestern direction to the Dab'a, then Matruh. President al-Sisi, during his tour, discussed workflow with workers and officials at different construction sites. He issued directives to clean and line all canals and drains in the area and to pave and raise efficiency of the roads. The President followed on the executive status and workflow of the construction work, highlighting the importance of sticking to the timeframes in executing these projects on high technical and engineering specifications. He also affirmed the need to strictly apply the preventative measures against coronavirus to ensure the safety of the workers at the construction sites.
Welcome back. You're still watching the Daily Debate. Dr. Meha, as I said in the beginning, the tour that was made by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi on the first day of 2021. How do you see the messages sent out for the Egyptians, for the citizens here in Egypt and for the outside world, telling them more about the hard work that is being put here in terms of infrastructure and the economy, and of course, up next, the investment as well?
Okay, first of all, it's very obvious that there are so many messages here. Messages to the Egyptians on a national level and messages to the outside world as well on an international level. The main message of all is that we have a president that has an action-oriented plan, or a government that is action-oriented.
Yes.
This is very obvious from the first day he was put in office. Also, it's really rare to find a politician that keeps promises. You know, politicians make a lot of promises. But to keep the promise and work on it and to actually see results is extremely prosperous. There's so much on the developmental agenda.
Yes.
And there is a vision. There is finally a vision since this government took office. And what is happening is that they are sticking to the agenda, and they're monitoring and they're evaluating as they're going through. And they are correcting if they happen to see any obstacles or hinders. So this is even making things better. Now, when we come to the infrastructure part especially,
Yes.
I have some numbers here. What Egypt has witnessed when it comes to the infrastructure reform is unprecedented in its history. It happened in a very short time frame. It's worth 175 billion Egyptian pounds. So much has been built, bridges, tunnels, a national project or infrastructure project of 7,000 kilometers. This is beyond amazing.
In 7 years?
In
How many
6 years.
6 years.
In 6 years. Now, in economics, because we analyze, I don't think you need me to display the numbers here because it's all over the internet and all over the news. But I can do the analysis here. These kinds of developmental projects, first, they are sustainable because they will stay for the coming generations and the coming months. And number two, they cause something called crowding in. This is a form of crowding in projects. What do I mean by crowding in? This means it calls. These are kinds of projects that calls money to be injected into the economy.
Yes.
Because this enhances investments, private investments, FDIs. This enhances tourism. When you have a good good infrastructure network, this also enhances new cities. And all of this causes prosperity for the country and the nation. This also enables other firms or subsidiary firms to open up as helping firms. So the whole area, the whole parts of the country prosper. So, and investment is the driving wheel for any economy. So when you focus on investment, you are actually focusing on a sustainable level.
Yes.
Which is extremely important. This is where the vision comes in. So the message to the Egyptian economy or to the national people is that this government is doing what it has promised, and it's really benefiting, and the fruits are we're witnessing, and we will be witnessing it more. Despite unemployment rates, despite housing, it feeds. Investment feeds. It causes multiplier effects, and it causes the economy to feed. It's like eating. So when you eat, you grow. So it causes the economy actually to grow. So they will see more growth. And I think Egypt, I know, we all know that Egypt has witnessed growth despite COVID and despite all the global decline. Egypt actually had a growth rate of 5.4, where it was, the GDP was 5.6 in the first half of 2020 and 5% in the third quarter of 2019 and 2020, which means it has actually witnessed a growth of 5.4%.
Yet, despite the coronavirus pandemic, as you've mentioned, Doctor, that 175 billion pounds were poured in the country for the sake of Egypt, for the sake of the citizens. But specifically speaking about the last year, to be battling the coronavirus pandemic and working at the same time for the sake of the economy. How would you assess the performance of the economy in the past year despite the battle against the coronavirus
Okay, that's a
pandemic?
very good question. Well, we all know that Egypt achieved growth despite the COVID because the government's implementation of many reforms during the first phase of the national program for economic and social reform since November 2016, it led to macro stability on a social and on an economic level. So this actually led to growth or comprehensive growth despite before actually the break of corona or before the crisis. And this is why it was witnessing positive indicators. Yet, when corona emerged, it affected and it declined many economic indicators, yet the reform efforts and Egypt's diversified economy, now this is where this is very important, this proved how flexible Egypt is to absorb in exogenous shocks, because these are shocks coming from external tunnels or channels. So this is where it was able to contain the shock or the pandemic. Also, it was fast in its response. Egypt was fast to respond to the first wave, especially. In fact, it was one of the best in the MENA region as a whole. Also, it did not just stop there. It's like they met and made a committee where they put the vulnerable on the top of the list. So it had a social protection program. There was also a presidential grant till the end of 2020 for the most hit hard and the vulnerable. There was also more injection for Takaful and Karama program. So why was this done? This is actually economic theory. This is called inbuilt stabilizer. So it's like, you know, when you inbuilt something into a wall or into a house, so it's inbuilt there. It works in the system automatically, mainly to stabilize aggregate demand or total demand of the economy, because when pandemics hit or outbreaks, they cause recessions. And when recessions occur, then demand falls. And when demand falls, then the whole economy will fall and stagnate. So these inbuilt stabilizers were seen in these grants, in the presidential grants, until the end of 2020, and in more cash injection to social protection programs to stabilize demand on an ongoing effect, so that the economy does not hit hard and crash into a recession due to the global pandemic. So in fact, this was like a package that Egypt has embraced to fight the pandemic. And it won the battle, actually.
And even before knowing that any setbacks would happen, that any pandemics would be happening all over the globe, we had the economic reform program here in Egypt in 2016. So it's like a preemptive measure from
yes,
Egypt.
and it was going. I mean, it was going on its path.
Yes.
With its outcomes, with its fruitful outcomes, with the indicators, and they were all positive, and until the pandemic hit.
So how do you see the future benefits of the economic reform program in 2021, as we did see praise coming from the IMF and the World Bank?
Well, there's so many, because it's not just the infrastructure program that the country is embracing. I mean, there's a lot of other developmental programs, mainly in education and in health. I have a lot of figures here that I can display later. Also, there is a lot of injection of cash and increase in public investment by focusing on extremely promising sectors like health, education, like agriculture, food supplies, agriculture. I mean, this is very important. Of course, construction, as we saw in the report, communication, manufacturing, and these are all sustainable sectors. I mean, when you focus on education and health and manufacturing, this is a sustainable agenda, which also will enable Egypt to meet its sustainable development goals of 2030. And of course, numbers don't lie. I mean, numbers speak for themselves, and we can see the GDP growth rate. Also, what made things easy is that Egypt had actually a lot of unemployed resources to start with. So when the president took over, you know, there was a revolution, and there was another revolution, and there was too much sleep in the market, or there was a huge recession, of course. Recession means a lot of unemployed resources. So you have a lot of waste. You have a lot of factors of production that is just lying idle, land, labor, and capital. So this government put these resources in action. And this is why we're witnessing now these outcomes or the fruits of these actions. So this also helped to boost the multiplier effect, which is portrayed or shown in the GDP figures.
Speaking about the growth rate here in Egypt, it hit 5.6% at the first part of the fiscal year 2020-21 before the coronavirus pandemic, and in the second quarter it dropped to 3.5%. How do you see the future growth rate despite battling the coronavirus pandemic here in Egypt?
In fact, you know the rating agency Fitch?
Yes.
It has projected that Egypt will have the highest real GDP growth rate in the whole MENA region from starting 2020 till 2024. The same applies by the economic output report by the IMF. So, in fact, there will be a boost in the GDP. GDP even if it goes down, it will not go down significantly,
yes,
especially compared to what's happening on the global level. So, I mean, you're not alone on the planet. So when you're actually doing well or good compared to a big fall from other countries and, you know, the West, which are the strong super countries, they're actually declining. So this is an indicator. This is where monitoring and evaluation comes in, and this is where it shows that you're doing something correct. So you need to continue in this path or even make it better. So what you're doing is the right thing, just boost it further.
Yes, the IMF also said that Egypt would be among the 10 best or the
Yes,
fastest growing countries in terms of economy for 2020. How do you see the indications on the ground that translates those statements?
Okay, now we come to the numbers. So, the state has actually increased public investment by 70%, emphasizing on health and education, and these are very, very important sectors that have long-run fruits. I mean, this kind of investment is investing in the human capital, which is the most important asset.
Yes.
And health and education are the main tools for development. Also, the state works hard to mobilize all kind of necessary and needed financial resources to advance education sector. There's some figures here. It aims to increase education sector by 50.9 billion in 2021, so this is the coming year, compared to 31.4 billion in 2020, and that's an increase of 61%. So this is the agenda for this year. Also, public investment for fiscal year 2020 and 2021 plan are set at 47.7 billion, which is at 93.7% of total investment, with a rise of 28% compared to the previous year. So you have an agenda that is boosting investments in different sectors. And all of these are called sustainable growth investments. Also, the volume investments in information infrastructure sector of 2021 plans to increase by 10 billion, and that's an increase of 30% compared to last year. Also, the manufacturing sector, which is a very important sector, one of the most important for sustainable development, because this is ongoing growth. The state will increase public investment in manufacturing industries to non-petroleum manufacturing sector to 65 billion, non-petroleum, so that's an indication of diversification. Also, the economy, actually the state is highlighting the green economy trend, which means it is going in parallel with international standards. So even the environment is put into consideration.
What is the importance of the term the green economy here in Egypt? Because we haven't heard a lot about it in the past years, but under the tenure of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, there seems to be a priority to be even turning the vehicles to be running on gas instead
Yes.
of petrol. How do you see the importance of the term the green economy for the Egyptian economy in the future as the whole world is going through this phase?
First of all, this is a very important sector or a very important problem. It's a problem. It's a wide world problem now. You know, the Paris Agreement that has taken place in 2018, I guess, about climate change. Climate change is hitting the whole world in a very negative way, negative effect. And Egypt is hit among the other countries on the globe. And Egypt will also be badly hit. I mean, we have two seas, the Mediterranean and the Red Sea and the Nile. There will be a lot of floods, and there will be a lot of, you know, the water rises each year.
Yes.
And we're going to have a lot of droughts because climate change causes extreme weather temperature. So it gets very cold and it gets very hot. And we have, I mean, well, I'll come to this part, I mean, the population growth rate,
Yes.
because this is one of the major challenges of the country. But we need a lot of agricultural support. And this will just fade away with climate change.
Yes.
So, actually, Egypt is in a dangerous position if it does not take care of the environment and if it does not work on green economy trends. Now, the good part is that it did, and there is work done to achieve 30% of investment projects for environmental sustainability and green economy, and the percentage will increase by 100% in the coming 3 years. So even this is inside the agenda, which means that the committee now, or the governmental committee is not really forgetting anything or is not missing anything on the sustainable development goals.
Yes.
So, I mean, we can have even a much longer talk about the importance of the climate change and the environmental aspect here in Egypt, on women, on the household, especially women, by the way, because a lot of women are actually indulged in the agriculture sector, especially in rural areas.
Yes.
So many of them work in that sector. So this is a very vital sector, and it's very important to stick to the global climate change agenda. And in fact, it's doing its part.
Yes. On the other hand, the initiatives that were put out or laid out by the government during the times of the coronavirus pandemic and before that, like the initiative of A Decent Life with the support of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, how do you see the importance for the whole economy and for the certain citizens that benefit from such an initiative?
Yeah, I had mentioned this earlier,
Yes.
But yet, I mean, as I said, the committee has a list of rankings or priorities.
Yes.
And it has the vulnerable and the low-income group or bracket group, and the social protection program and Takaful and Karama. So what I mean is that it has an eye on this group in no matter decision it makes. Unlike before, when these groups, I think, were never on the agenda. So they meet, they put an action plan, but there's always, by the side, there's always another agenda for the hardly hit. And this is what I meant by inbuilt stabilizers.
Yes.
To stabilize demand and hence stabilize the whole economy. I mean, why do they do it? Why is it done for the vulnerable? Because in fact, the marginal propensity to consume of the poor is way higher than the rich. I mean, the rich have surplus of money. They tend to save more. But the poor, they don't have surplus of money. They spend more. And spending is very important to keep the economy running. And this is why we say the market, I mean, when they say the market's sleeping, it means that the market is not functioning well because spending is going down.
Yes.
So spending is very important to boost economies and to boost markets. So despite making sure that the people live a life of dignity on a social level, there is also the inbuilt stabilizers on the economic level. Also, we come to the housing projects. I don't exactly remember the figures, but I think there was 500,000 apartments in 6 years were built. Yes. For the low-income people, or even more. And there was a whole national plan for the marginalized areas, which I think was even more than 100 billion Egyptian pounds. So, I mean, this is all for dignity. When you move people from horrible living conditions to much better, like Asmarat neighborhood, which has full infrastructure. I mean, this is really done for dignified reasons. So the vulnerable and I mean the Egyptian nation is on the agenda, and the vulnerable are on the priority of the list.
Yes, one of the other priorities for President Sisi and for the political leadership and Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli is to be supporting the small and medium enterprises as well. How do you see the plan that was put in the past years and how it would be developing despite the coronavirus pandemic in 2021?
The SMEs, it is indulged in the investment program. And there was a loan from the World Bank and from other IFCs for SMEs. Actually, it was even held by the Ministry of International Cooperation. So it was also on the priority of lists, especially for women in rural areas. And I have seen the projects for SMEs for women who are breadwinners in rural areas. And not just that, because I mean things branch. So when they came to put the plan for the SMEs, then there was an obstacle, which is the banking sector. For it, in order to get a loan, you have to go to the bank, and to go to the bank, you have to have an ID, you have to have an account, and I think, as we all know, most Egyptians don't have this
bank account. Yes.
Yes, especially in rural areas and in Upper Egypt. So there was another plan to facilitate this. So and that's the branching, I mean. So in order to have the whole umbrella in place, you have to have the other steps indulged into it. So there was another action plan for the banking inclusion and for ID issuing, to enable the people to take the loans for the SMEs projects. So it's not important just to put the law or to put the announcement. What's more important is to implement it.
Yes.
So the whole implementation plan is actually is taking place. So SMEs are going to flourish. They're extremely important for developing nations. We know Nobel Prize winners who have emphasized the role of SMEs, like in Pakistan and other developing countries. Also, the formalization program, this is also to help the SMEs. So this is what I mean by all the other little sectors that are important in order to have the whole SMEs program in place or intact. So it's also doing very well in this aspect, and it will be foreseen later in the future as well.
Yes, we will be having the biggest budget in the Egyptian history in 2020-21 with about 2.2 trillion pounds, and the spending will be increased by 1.7 trillion pounds. What is the importance of those numbers, especially the spending part, as you've mentioned, Doctor, that without spending, the whole economy would be going down?
Okay. Now, when you go for an SME or for a project,
yes,
you need a loan. You take this loan and to finance your project. Now, once you do that, you don't just benefit yourself. There's a whole supply chain in the process. So you open your project, but in order to have your project ongoing, you need to supply it. So you have to go to another supplier and another supplier and another supplier to get your whole project on foot. Now, this generates income, not only for you, for all the others that you have interacted with.
Yes.
So the end effect or the end result is an increase in GDP, not only by the number that has been projected for the SMEs, but by a multiplier effect. So if it was 2 trillion, the change that will occur in the GDP growth rate because of this injection will be actually higher than the initial injection released for the projects. So this is going to make a big boost in the economy and prosperity. So this is how this multiplier effect works when there is a certain injection of cash or money into the market. And SMEs is the market, because now you're going to be indulged in the market. Also, it will be a formal process. It's not going to be in the informal sector, of course,
Yes.
which means it will be recorded by the government, which means it will be taxed, which means that this will increase tax revenues for the state, which means that these tax revenues will help to produce public services for the nation. So it's like a whole chain into each other,
Yes.
related to each other. So it feeds, this is what I meant by feeding on itself. It can also increase exports, that's another sector. If you produce some, even if it's on an SME scale, you produce something and you export it outside. Without mentioning names, I know a lot of entities that produce handmade crafts, and these are all SMEs. This is not mass production, which is sold in Dubai and in several other exhibitions. So this is also enhancing or boosting the export sector. So at the end, everyone prospers. Even the third party, which is not involved.
Yes.
Because when the government is able to record projects and then tax the people and then use the taxation to develop or to spend on public services, a totally different party will be using these services. So the whole economy flourishes.
Yes, and speaking of the whole economy, we will be having more achievements, and we will be discussing the achievements of 2020 in the Egyptian economy after the upcoming reports. Stay tuned.
Since July 2014, the date President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi took office, the state has been in a hurry to complete an array of mega projects that include roads, bridges, tunnels, new cities, and even a new canal. In the housing sector alone, Egypt has completed 1,426 projects during the past 6 years at an estimated cost of £175 billion. The Ministry of Housing, in conjunction with the New Urban Communities Authority, is constructing 14 fourth-generation cities: the new administrative capital, New Alamein, New Mansoura, East Port Said, Nasser City in western Asyut, and New Ismailia, among others. The total covered by the 14 new cities is 380,000 acres, which is 50% of the area allocated to new urban communities in the previous 4 decades. The new administrative capital was announced in March 2015 during the economic summit held in Sharm el-Sheikh. It is located 60 kilometers from Cairo, in the area between the Cairo-Suez and Cairo-Ain al-Sukhna roads, 50 kilometers east of the regional ring road. While the total area of Cairo is estimated at 95,000 fedans, the administrative capital is being built over 170,000 fedans. The new capital, which is expected to accommodate 7 million people, will include residential areas, the government district, a central district, business international airport, and exhibition and convention centers. The government plans that by the end of 2020, it will get rid of all structurally unsafe slums, and by 2030, unplanned areas will have been eliminated entirely. New cities need to be linked. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi launched the National Road Project in 2014, with the goal of constructing and upgrading 7,000 kilometers of highways. Almost 5,000 kilometers are now complete, with the remaining 2,000 kilometers expected to be finished by the end of the year. The work on upgrading roads has already paid off in terms of a reduction in the number of accidents. The new Sharm el-Sheikh road, which was inaugurated last year, shortens the journey time between Cairo's New Cairo district to Sharm el-Sheikh by 4 hours. The 30 July axis, a 95-kilometer-long dual freeway built at a cost of £8.5 billion, was inaugurated late last year and connects South Port Said with the Cairo-Ismailia Desert Road via International Coastal Road. Among the most important bridges that were inaugurated amid the plethora of construction were the Road al-Farag axis and the Tahya Masr suspension bridge crossing the Nile. Along with roads and bridges, Egypt widened the 193-kilometer Suez Canal with a 72-kilometer parallel waterway. Dubbed the New Suez Canal, it was inaugurated in August 2015 at a cost of £64 billion. 4 new tunnels have been constructed beneath the canal, 2 in Port Said and 2 in Ismailia, to alleviate the pressure on the Ahmed Hamdi tunnel. They will facilitate the ambitious development schemes being implemented in Sinai at an estimated cost of £275 billion.
Building new cities and building new roads, the infrastructure development and the progress made in 2020 in this sector. How do you see, Doctor, the importance of building a new capital, having a new capital, having new cities all over Egypt, as the report said, in Mansoura, the new Mansoura city, new Alamein city, the new administrative capital, different new cities in different parts of the governorates and the roads linking each one of them. How do you see the importance of this for the economy and for the citizen and for the investments as well coming?
Okay, as I mentioned, this is all called crowding in effect. This is where everything crowds in. I mean, let's take, for example, in the early 90s, when there was New Cairo developing. We have not heard of New Cairo in the 80s. So it was just a desert place, desert road, and then it started emerging. And the first thing we ever heard over there, I think, was Shoifat International School. How do you see New Cairo today? It's a whole city on its own. So, and we see how prosperous it has become. So this is what I mean by crowding in. So when the road was developed for New Cairo area, and then the residential areas, and then the school opened, and then everything fed on this. And then we started seeing more schools, and now international schools, international universities, more houses and villas, and a lot of business, because you have the 90 road there,
yes,
which is a commercial road.
Is it the same idea now to be having a university like Al Galila University, for example?
Exactly. So you got my point.
In different points, in different
Yes.
places, they called the desert back then.
Exactly. And then the university will have another subsidiary firm open to cater to it. Like if you have a university, then you will have a library next to it, or a bookstore, or a photocopying.
And transportation,
exactly.
going back and forth. Yes.
Exactly. And a bus stop. Everything that feeds the university or helps or facilitates the entity or the organization. The same applies for anything else. As time goes by, and then if you have a university there, then you have people who live there. If you have people who live there, then you have children, kids. If you have kids, then you have a nursery. So the nursery wouldn't have been there if the university has not been initiated, yes, and so on and so forth. And then as time goes by, the whole area prospers. And this increases, of course, the standard of living for the whole economy. I mean, first for this area, and then the whole economy as a whole in the end. So this is what I meant by the building in, by crowding in. The same applies for investment. I mean, when the whole commercial road of Road 90 opened in New Cairo, this is all investment projects. Yes. And these investments call tourism. So this increases tourism, and it increases exports in the international sector, and so on. And so the whole sectors of the economy will benefit. The consumer sector, the investor sector, of course the government would benefit by getting the taxes that it needs to run its spending. And the international sector, when you export, when you have hard currency coming in, we have foreign direct investment stepping into your country to further boost investment. So this is the crowding in effect, because we also, as crowding in, you have crowding out. Any kind of infrastructure is a crowding in, not a crowding out. Crowding out is when you push investment outside due to whatever wrong policies. Crowding in is when you call investment inside, and all sorts of investments are very crucial and beneficial and important to economies.
Doctor, you mentioned also the progress made by the Egyptians in general, and by the support of the political leadership in terms of health, and in terms of education, in terms of tourism as well. How do you see the progress translated on the ground in the past 6 or 7 years, and more specifically in 2020 and hopefully in 2021?
Okay, that's a very good question as well. Now, what this government has done is nearly an accomplishment of 15,000 projects. Something also unprecedented.
In 6 or 7 years.
Yes, in 6 years. Which is worth 2,207.3 billion Egyptian pounds. So this is amazing, and this is a lot. Now, as the numbers, as we said, speak for itself. To break down all the sectors, it had, in trade and manufacturing, for example, it had 89, last year, 89 projects worth 48,000 million pounds. Agricultural development, 224 projects worth 17,000 million Egyptian pounds. Self-sufficiency of gas, with 115 projects worth 16 million Egyptian pounds. Tourism sector development, 101 projects worth 410 million Egyptian pounds. I mean, as I'm portraying this, you see the sectors.
Yes.
Health and education. Now, this is the most important, of course, because here you're investing in the human asset, which is the most important. Health and education development, we had 960 projects in health, which were worth 81,290 million Egyptian pounds. 5,026 projects in education, which is worth 31,289 million Egyptian pounds, and 1,484 projects in higher education, worth 18 million Egyptian pounds. Also, the social protection project, 392 projects worth 84,000 million. This is the social protection program, which is the vulnerable and the poor, and I mean, for the inbuilt stabilizers for stabilizing aggregate demand.
Yes.
Basic infrastructure for the marginalized areas, 107.27 billion Egyptian pounds, providing more than 600,000 units for the low-income people. 1,121 projects in water sanitation projects for clean water. This is for human dignity as well, worth 74 million Egyptian pounds. As we all see, we never witnessed any power cuts for energy. Yes. Energy is important for investment as well. Transportation development, where there was 377 projects worth 95.5 billion Egyptian pounds. Now, with all of these investments, and even despite COVID, we should not ever fail or forget to mention the reduction in unemployment rate from 7.3% from July to, from 9.6% from April to June 2020 to 7.3% from July to September 2020, which is like 3 months ago.
Yes.
So actually we witnessed a reduction in unemployment rate in the same year of 2020. And this is due to carrying out 900,000 new developmental and service projects. So this is why, despite COVID and despite a global decline in most of the countries, actually Egypt witnessed growth. In fact, it's the only one in the Middle East.
And this shows that we have, as you've mentioned, a diversified economy here in Egypt, as we can see other countries in the Middle East trying to be getting to where we are now. How do you see the importance of this and the benefits of having a diversified economy in 2021 and beyond?
First of all, not just being diversified. We said because it was able to have a very fast response. It did not just lay back there and just witness and too much. And there was no time delay until it took the action. Yes. It was able to absorb the shock because of the diversification. It was able to also absorb the shock because of the inbuilt stabilizers and stabilizing aggregate demand, and also. We call this lagging indicators because it had already started the reform program. So the reform program was going in parallel all across the years, or all through the years, and this is why we saw fruitful results despite the pandemic. Also, we should not fail to mention that projects were still ongoing. And this is why we had a reduction in unemployment rate due to 900,000 projects in services and in developmental sectors. And I think, as you have now put in your two reports, that despite the COVID and despite that it's going to continue for maybe another 2 years, projects are still ongoing. They will not stop.
Yes. And finally, the challenges facing the Egyptian economy in this year and afterwards.
That's also a very good question. I think I have one challenge to mention, and I think it's the most important challenge. It's the greatest of all, which is the increase in population growth rate. In Egypt, the population growth rate increases by 2.56%. And that's really high. It's a very high growth rate, yes. And in 2030, the number of Egyptian people will be 132.3 million. So Egypt is actually increasing annually by a size of a country with a population of 2.5 million every year. And that's really high. That's high and that's dangerous at the same time. Why? Because it is creating an imbalance between the population growth rate and the size of the resources. So at the end of the day, you have your resources. When you keep increasing the population is eating from these resources. It's draining, it's stressing it out. So this actually destroys the fruits of the achieved growth. And it threatens the economy on a social and on an economical front. And also, a very major drawback is that it diminishes the efforts for per capita spending on education, on health, on housing, and on transportation. So actually, it will make people poorer, or worse off, not better off. So another thing in economics is the dependency ratio. So like, if you're one person employed in a household, so
you have like those are the main challenges facing.
In fact, I just mentioned one. The population.
The overpopulation.
Yes.
Of course, we'll be having more time next time to be discussing such a problem and the solutions, the possible solutions for it. Dr. Meha Mustafa, the professor of economics at the American University in Cairo and the economic expert, thank you very much for being with us tonight on the Daily Debate, and once again, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, and thank you for having me, and it was my ultimate pleasure.
Pleasure is all mine. And this brings us to the end of the Daily Debate for tonight. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.